So let's move on then to our next part of our process. So here you see the whole process, and what we've covered is the preparation and candidate applications. So now we are going to go on to the next episode, which is about how you go about screening. So screening is about looking at your applications and deciding who are the best candidates to bring in for an interview, and which candidates you will be sending a decline letter to. Now, the thing to consider about the people who don't make it through the screening and be invited to an interview, when you're looking at those candidates, the way you send your decline letter or your decline email again sends a message to the candidates about you. So if it is that this on this occasion they don't meet the criteria which you stated in your advert in terms of the attainments and competencies, then it would be a good idea to say on this occasion we've got more suitable candidates. However, and then say something about the future. So if it is that they could apply next time, please feel free to apply next time, then you give them the opportunity to stay connected with you. So how you decline someone also can be the start of another application. So consider how it is that you send decline letters to those candidates that have applied that haven't displayed the competencies and the attainments that you need for your role. So, screening and inviting to interviews. What you will need for this is your person spec and your role description. And using both of these will ensure that you have an effective screening process. Now, effective screening is important on many fronts. As Cheryl mentioned earlier, it's important to bring those people in for interview that are that on the surface of it look fit for purpose and a good fit. You don't want to be wasting people's time, and you don't want to be wasting your time. So using your person spec and your role description that you've spent the time to think about, what are the attainments, skills, knowledge, previous experience, and or qualifications if required, and what are the competencies, so what are the soft skills that people might need for the role. You've taken time to consider those and you've written them down and you've mentioned them in your advert. So now you use that information to start to look at the applications that you have received. What's really helpful is that you read through all of your applications in one sit, ideally in one sitting. Obviously, if you've got 20 applications, then that might be a little bit of a stretch. But certainly when you're looking through your applications, have a highlighter pen to hand so that you can identify the aspects in their applications that match the competencies and the attainments that you've mentioned in your advertisement, and that would be things to explore during the interview. And as you do this, refer back to your person specification and your role description and make some notes that ensure that the questions that you ask in interview will have face validity for the person. So that might be, okay, you mentioned that you've worked on a reception desk before in your application. You've mentioned that you worked on a reception desk before. Can you tell me about what that entailed? So what you will be then able to do is to listen about the tasks that they completed and compare them with the tasks that you would expect them to complete for you. So when you're looking through your screening, you are thinking about the questions that you would ask. And when we come to this episode about questions, there are general questions that you would ask all candidates, and then specific questions that you would ask particular candidates to get specific information. So as you're looking through your applications, be sure to look for the specific skills that you have said that are required for the role, and make sure that again, when you're asking questions, you refer back to the competencies that you've described in your advertisement. And what's really important is that when you're looking certainly at the tasks side of it, the thing to do is not to assume when someone says, I've worked on a receptionist desk, or I've worked in reception, or I've worked in a call center, that the way that they have done that is exactly the same as you have in your organization. So it's really important that you don't assume that completion of one task in a different context will be the same as you require in your role. Familiarize yourself with things like equal opportunities, equality and diversity and inclusion, and the guidance that is available on that, so that you can ensure that when you are in an interview, you're asking questions that fall within the guidelines. And if you have more than one applicant to review, another thing to consider is to use the essential and desirable criteria that we talked about in the person spec. So you remember that in the person spec, I talked about having the essential criteria and the desirable. So if you have lots of candidates to screen, you could then do a second screening on the desirable criteria. So that gives you a fine tuning on the screening that you will undertake. Perhaps if you've got a lot of applicants to screen, you could perhaps ask a candidate to undertake the same screening process and then compare notes. What's important is that your screening enables you to invite people to interview that have, on face value, have fit for purpose, a fit to your role. And when you invite candidates, again, this is a message that you're giving to your candidates about your organization. The way you invite candidates tells them a lot about your organization. And as I mentioned earlier, the way you decline people also gives an impression about your organization. So think about the way you invite people for interview. Explain to them exactly what the interview process will be, where the interview will be, and also consider if the interview will be on Zoom or face-to-face. So here you'll see a screening template, and you'll find one of these, a handy template for you to copy in your resource pack. And here you'll see the candidate's name is in the first column, and you'll see that as you've gone through the applications, you've been making a note of how the candidate matches up to the knowledge, skills, and competencies that you require. And what this enables you to do is to make some notes for interview. So when you look at this, this is a very transparent process. If you think about candidate 2 here, this candidate has the skills, but not perhaps the knowledge that you require. Candidate 3 has quite a number of the things that you're looking for, but not the qualifications. So is that something that you could train for? Is that something that you could offer them as part of the role? And likewise with candidate 1, is the lacking of competence 2, is that something that's easily trained? So when you're doing your screening, it enables you to think about perhaps what would be required in the onboarding of a particular candidate if they're successful. And as I said, this gives you a transparent way of assessing your candidates and assessing them against the criteria that you have described in your person spec. So here's an opportunity to pause the video and think about how you have screened in the past, how you screened candidates in the past, and how this new methodology might cause you to do it in a different way. Might you include different people in the screening process? So Cheryl, What about questions that you've had in terms of screening applicants?
First one that springs to mind is that many volunteer managers will say, I'm lucky if I only get one applicant. So do you
Oh,
have to go through the whole screening process if there is only one applicant, or can you slim it down?
great, great, yes. It's really important to, if you have the candidate, if you only have one candidate, sorry, to actually use the screening template. Because what that will do is it will make very clear to you whether this, even though it's just one candidate, whether this candidate is a good enough fit, and if there are any places where the candidate the candidate doesn't look as though they fit, is it trainable? So even if you have one candidate, what's important is that the people that you bring to interview are a close fit for your role. So the screening template is very helpful for that, because, and I have heard this myself with working in the number of charities that I've worked with, is our volunteer better than none? Well, one of the things that has been answered to that question for me in a number of occasions is that actually when we've recruited the wrong person, it's been quite painful, not only for the volunteer, but also for the organisation. So even though it might be only one applicant, please ensure that they have a good enough fit, that the areas that they perhaps don't have can be accommodated.
It's like a really sensible suggestion. Um, your template mentioned something about anonymizing. Why might you want to anonymize applications?
Yes,
What are
yeah,
the advantages?
yeah, that's a really great question. One of the things that certainly from an equal opportunities point of view is concerned is when you anonymize candidate applications, you are purely just looking at what they have to offer. So one of the things that is widely talked about now in terms of equal opportunities is unconscious bias. One of the things that happens when you anonymize applications is that you decrease the prevalence of unconscious bias. I mean, that's a whole different subject that you may or may not run programs for, but certainly anonymizing applications takes away any unconscious bias and increases objectivity.
Right. So it removes any clues that there might be to what gender somebody is, or whether they come from a different culture to your own, that kind of thing.
Absolutely, absolutely, absolutely.
Brilliant. Thank you. Um, and my only other question is around sort of terminology and things. A lot of organisations deliberately won't hold interviews because they want to draw a distinction between volunteering and paid work.
Mm.
And instead, they invite potential volunteers to come in for a chat.
Mm.
And this is a deliberate kind of distinction that they draw because they don't want to give volunteers the impression that they're going to be treated in exactly the same way as employees, particularly the paycheck bit.
Mhm.
And I just wondered how this approach can gel with the screening and the invitations and the declining and all of that stuff.
Mhm.
Is it just about being sensitive with the language?
It is, Cheryl, it is, and that's a really good point. I guess from my experience of working with charities and my experience of working with a wide variety of organisations, it's really important that people feel safe, frankly. And if they're coming in for a chat, my question would be, as an HR director, my question would be, what do you want to achieve? Because if you are assessing them and not saying that, that's disrespectful. So if it is, please come in for an informal interview, or please come in for an informal chat. We'll be exploring what we had in our advert, because what you have done in your advert, you have said, as part from what you've put in your person spec, you have said about the skills, knowledge, previous experience, and competencies that the volunteer would need for the role. If you are assessing that, it's really good practice to say that up front. Even if you say, come in for an informal chat, we'll be talking about the skills, knowledge, and competencies for the role. So if you want to make
a really good approach, yeah, I like that.
Yeah, if you want to make it low key, totally understand that, totally understand that. But it's really important to be transparent as a means of displaying respect.
Thanks, Alexandra. No more questions for now?
Okay, great. Okay,